Welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. I'm David Hines. It's been a busy day today in Guyana. We had the demonstrations, the nurses continuing their demonstrations after being locked out. They had some meetings with members of the board today. They spotted people who were unvaccinated going in to the hospital, and they've remained militant there. And of course, the teachers have joined the demonstrations today. They demonstrated all over the country. Of course, they are in the face of the same dilemma that they are skeptical about the vaccine, and they are likely to be locked out when schools reopen next week. And of course, there is a problem about whether we are ready to open schools face-to-face instruction. So people have been out today demonstrating. And then, of course, we got the shock news later on in the day that former President David Granger and leader of the PNC is taking leave of absence. And there are lots of speculation about what that means for a number of things. But we're not going to be dealing with that tonight. But that was in the news today. Further afield in the United States, the Hurricane Ida, the aftermath of the hurricane ravaging the United States of America. And we know we have people, Guyanese, living in those cities that have been affected. And so therefore our prayers go out to them, and please make sure you call and make sure your relatives are safe. It's a busy day of political news. Tonight we are going to be talking about two issues. Of course, the COVID issue. We're going to be talking about the legal side of it. As you know, the Guyana Public Service Union, the Guyana Teachers Union, and the Guyana Trade Union Congress, the umbrella organization, they've gone to court challenging the legality, the constitutionality of the orders that have been made by the government in relation to COVID-19. So we're going to be talking about that with attorney at law, one of the attorneys on the case, attorney at law Darren Wade, and Amanza Walton Desir is also a lawyer. So she's here primarily to talk about the second topic, which is the PPP's response to the rally in New York a couple of weekends ago, and that they wrote to the US Congress complaining that they've been lied to by opposition elements and setting the record straight according to them. We're going to be talking about what prompted that response, what that response is all about, and what are the consequences. So those are our two topics tonight. Aubrey North is going to be joining us later on. So we have a big show tonight, very good lineup. Darren Wade, Amanza Walton Desir, Aubrey North, and we'll be talking about the legal side of the pandemic and, of course, the PPP's response to the outreach or outreaches by the opposition to international forces. How hypocritical. Last year, it was all about the international forces. We know that the election was won by the PPP because the international forces said that. Now, when the international forces are saying that you are governing in a racist way, the international forces are misled. Hypocrites. Tell you what, we're going to start tonight with some music. You all know I like my Caribbean music. We're going to be starting. I think this calypso is apt. It's called The Vision, 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 by the late, great singing Sandra. Oh, God. Oh, oh, Lord. Oh, no, 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 no. The first one.
Well, in the vision I saw an old man slowly beating a drum, humming a melody that was strange to me. Then he called me and said, Sandra, come. He arose and he showed me a country, beautiful everywhere, a land of endless bounty and the riches beyond compare. There was enough for everybody, for all their material needs. But alas, when the old man showed me people, they were all overpowered with greed. And the old man beat it drum. The old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath to come, and if you hear him, bye-bye. Revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. I want them of the wrath. You're gonna get on them of the road to come. Leaders were fighting each other. They were tearing me people apart. Friends who used to live happy together, now hatred filling their hearts. Neighbors were cursing neighbors, whole villages in mayhem. I heard they were listening deceitful leaders who were preaching for doctrine to them. Look, compassion went out of the window. Deviousness reigned instead. Morality was low, 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 but the people were spiritually dead. But the old man beat it drum. The old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath. And if you hear, warn them of the wrath. You're gonna get revelation. You know what he tell me? He said, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Oh, tell it on the mountain. The old man beat his drum. The youths were all in a quandary, no sense of direction. They lost all hope cause they just can't cope. They're ready yet, but they're gone. They have no respect for their elders, no respect for themselves also. Their spirits were all in tatters and reading an all-time low. Then I hear them cussing the system, they're cussing the leaders too. But they were raping, stealing, shooting and looting, cause they all had nothing else to do. The old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country. country, want them on the road to come and want them on the road to come. We're gonna get revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. Want them on the road to come. He said, talk to your spiritual leaders. Tell them get on their knees and pray. To get rid of all these karmas that driving good spirits away. Then he tell them, talk to your fellow Calypsonians. Tell them stop the shame and disgrace. Encouraging people to get on bad, jump up and mash up the place. But behold, I saw the sunrise coming over the mountain range. The old man said, that is a symbol of hope if your people get serious and change. But the old man beat it drum. The old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them on the road.
I know you guys feel that. I hope your paws raised.
Back to Politics 101, of course, singing Sandra there, warning us. Does that sound like Guyana? It sounds like Guyana to me. The wisdom of the artist. The wisdom of the artist, always painting a portrait of our Caribbean, our Guyana. Sometimes we hear ourselves and we see ourselves in those songs, those redemption songs, as Bob Marley puts it. Warn them of the road to come. Don't listen to leaders who are spreading false narratives. You know, the PPP has charged those of us on this side, saying that we are misleading our people, that we are not being responsible leaders. You know, they want us to abandon our people. People, ordinary people, they do not get a chance every day to say to their leaders, you're wrong. And whenever they get an opportunity to do that, they do it with all the force at their disposal. Ordinary people like freedom. All people like freedom. And when they smell it, they want more of it. And there was more freedom than we had become accustomed to in Guyana between 2015 and 2020. It was not perfect. There were mistakes. But for the first time in the post-colonial history of our Caribbean, we could smell and feel some personal freedom. People were not locked up if they were against the government. No one was assassinated. Those who were in charge put their feet on the brakes of the authoritarian state, and people liked that. There were other things they didn't like, but they liked that. And so now, when the government is telling them that we want to curtail freedom, they're standing up. You see, it's been 400 years and more that we have sacrificed for personal liberty and collective freedom. And so people are saying many things. Some are saying we're not going to take a vaccine. Some are saying we are skeptical of the vaccine. Some are saying we don't want you to tell us, to force us to take the vaccine. Some are saying, give us some more information and education, and we will consider taking the vaccine. Some are saying, personal liberty matters. Of course, those of us who are political theorists, we know that personal liberty has to be tempered by order in the society. But the ordinary man and woman sees and wants that personal freedom. And so we are at a juncture in our history that we are being tested. We are being tested. This is how we will know whether we have leaders, if they can pass this test. And all leaders have a role to play. The government and the opposition. But the government wants us in the opposition to do their work for them. All of us have been talking to our people. All of us have been saying to our people, this pandemic is real. All of us are saying that personal safety is real. We have to continue to talk to our people. Sometimes we have to argue with them. Sometimes we have to cajole them. We have been doing that on the opposition side. We have been trying our best. We have been risking our people cussing us out. But we cannot abandon our people to satisfy your political demands. Even if I am a vaccine believer, I am not going to abandon my brothers and sisters who are hesitant over it. I'm not going to abandon my people to satisfy the PPP, and I will not advise any political leader to do that. The PPP, they have a party and a government. They have power, institutional power that we don't have. And they have not been using that power wisely. They've been using it one track, vaccine. They've not been saying to people, here are some options. If you don't want to take the vaccine or you're not ready for the vaccine, here are some options. They've not been reasoning with our people. When you are faced with a crisis, you have to meet that crisis with all the power at your disposal, political power, cultural power, intellectual power. It is in times like these that we are tested. But the PPP is one track. You take the vaccine or else. There's nothing else. And people are going to push back against that. What do you want us in the opposition to do? If you are messing up, we can clean your mess. Dr. King used to tell the white leaders in America, he's not a fire hose. They caused their fire and he must come to put the fire out. He said, I'm not going to do that. And we on the opposition side are not your fire hoses. You cause your fire and you want us to put it out for you. You have institutional power. You have a bigger microphone. We are confined to these spaces online because we are shut out from the public and private media. You, the government, have access to those media. And yet you're not using them. It's not whether I agree with people who are on the streets, that's not important, but I agree with their view of how we will beat COVID-19. What is important is for me and for other leaders to stand with them as they are crying out for justice. We have to understand their cries And insofar as we can give them information and perspectives, we have to do that too. We have to do both. But you, the PPP, want us to abandon our people. If we don't abandon them, you say that we are encouraging them. I have not heard one major leader of the opposition encouraging people not to take the vaccine. Rather, what we are doing is that we are recognizing their anxieties. So we have the clash or the convergence of public health and personal liberty. We have the convergence of public health and people's sense of what their choices are. And so we have to move to the law. We have to move to the law. We have to explore all possibilities. Because what happens when a government forces you to take a vaccine and COVID-19 is gone, they will force you to take something else tomorrow and next year. And we will be developing a culture of government dictatorship as far as the individual is concerned. Governments, when they accumulate power, they never give it back. They never give it back. I'm sorry to keep my guests waiting. They're coming on. I'm gonna ask the operator to go to the second clip and play 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Because I want you all to understand the moment that we are in. I'm not trying to scare people, but we are at a critical moment. A critical moment in our country's history, in our region's history, in the world. Because last year, we warned against the installation of a one-party government. We felt it was unwise. And now, the majority of those people out there feel that this government does not have the right to govern and has the right to tell them to do anything. That is the elephant in the room. Our sisters and brothers, CARICOM countries, are facing the same challenges, but they're meeting those challenges in a more effective way. Because at least in those countries, the people accept the right of the government to govern. They are prepared at a certain level to listen to the government. In Guyana, half of the population is not prepared to listen to the government. That's our problem. And who want to ignore that, they can ignore it. I am not going to ignore it. That is what we have to deal with. And until the PPP understands that fighting COVID requires them to recognize a lack of broad legitimacy and make adjustments, there will be no peace in the land as far as this COVID is concerned. Let's listen to some music, and when we come back, Amanza Desir, Amanza Walton Desir, Darren Wade, and later on, Aubrey Norton.
I took a journey spiritually. My eyes beheld a vision shone clearly in front of me. Now in the vision I saw an old man slowly playing a drum, humming a melody that was strange to me. And then he called me, he said, Dana, come. He arose and he showed me a country, beautiful everywhere, a land with endless bounty and riches beyond compare. Now there was enough for everybody to meet the material needs, But alas, when the old man showed me, my people, they was all overpowered with greed. Oh, and the old man played the drum. The old man played the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country and warn them on the road to come on if you hear it. Revelation time. This is revelation. Revelation, warn them on the road. He start to walk. Warn them on the road to come. Leaders was fighting leaders. There was tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live loving together, now hatred filling their heart. Neighbor was cussing neighbor. Whole villages in mayhem. I hear they wasn't listening to deceitful leaders who preaching false doctrine to them. Compassion gone out the window. Deviousness reigned instead. Morality was reading low, cause my people, they were spiritually dead. Oh, and the old man, he played drum. I said, the old man, he played the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country and warn them on the road. So come on, if you hear it. Revelation. Oh, this is revelation.
Oh, this is revelation time. One of the road to come, a country full riches for all of us. The leaders are tearing us apart, but we're going to survive this. Let me bring in my guest, Amanza Walton this evening, needs no introduction. Darren Wade, the people's lawyer, needs no introduction. Darren, we come from a tradition, when I was your age and in the struggle, we had about 20 lawyers who would come to the party office and volunteer to represent us, you know, and we used to call them the people's lawyers. The numbers have shrunk, but you are you are a beacon and you are an example to young people of selfless service. You know, the people give you the education, they pay for your education. You educate yourself and then you come back and you give back to the people as a form of political nourishment. It's like the gardener with the water can coming back and helping the flowers to bloom. So you are taking them to court. You're arguing that the president is not acting constitutionally. Talk to us. What the story is.
Thank you. My mic was muted here early. Good night to you, Dr. Hines, Amanza, and to all of your viewers. The three major unions in Guyana has instituted legal proceedings challenging the order of March 16, 2020. It was an order by the former administration. We are of the view that order, or rather the order continues under this government because it's the same order PPP is using currently. We are of the view that that order, that gazetted order, is unconstitutional because one, Article 111 of the Constitution stipulates that where a statute or the Constitution placed an authority on the president, it must not be delegated. What the order in the said order of March 16, 2020 is doing, the president would have delegated his authority to the Minister of Health. So before the minister was under the former administration, currently the minister, who is the Minister of Health, who is Dr. Frank Anthony, under this current administration. The authority that the president has is under the health ordinance, I believe of 1924, 1926, several years ago, the health ordinance. So we are contending that delegation of that authority is unlawful. Similar to the president cannot delegate his authority to consult on the appointment of the Commissioner of Police or to work in accordance with the agreement with the leader of the opposition. That is authority that cannot be delegated to the president. So we are contending that that is unlawful. Similarly, the authority under the said health ordinance, the president is only to use it in emergencies. The authority is the Board of Central Health. The Board of Central Health have been meeting every month. So you were telling me, let us say, okay, on March 16, 2020, when the then president would have instituted these stipulations, because of COVID-19, getting everybody to come together, it was difficult. Oh, let us give that. We could understand that. But since March 2016 to today's date, you were telling me that the Central Health could not have met to discuss this. And quite frankly, the mayor of Georgetown would have given an affidavit, and he's a member of the Board of Central Health by statute, and say they have been meeting. So there is nothing that is stopping the Board of Central Health for deciding issues as it relates to COVID-19. And I believe in a democracy, it is always better for several persons to meet and to discuss and to stipulate, rather than for one man to make the decision. And so we believe that the authorities have been acting unlawfully. I believe that in a synopsis, that is our challenge.
That's your challenge. Amanda, let me get you in here. You and I spoke off air a couple of days ago, and I raised the question of the emergency, whether we were in an emergency. We know that there's not a declared emergency. And I was speculating as to whether implicit in the presence of a pandemic is an emergency. The question therefore I'm asking, can an emergency be implied, or does the president have to declare an emergency?
I think no. Well, good evening, first of all, Dr. Hines and Darren. I call Darren our own Clarence Jones, who you recall was Martin Luther King's attorney. But no, it is important, it is necessary that a state of emergency be declared because of the implications of having a state of emergency. One cannot leave that to wonder. So this is why it says you have to declare a state of emergency, not imply a state of emergency, not assume a state of emergency. A state of emergency has to be declared because it necessarily requires certain conduct from its citizenry. It necessarily imposes certain restrictions, and it vests certain extraordinary powers. And so, of course, it has to be declared. It is not something that we could leave for inference or implication.
And so since an emergency has not been declared, the president cannot act as if there is a state of emergency. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, that is a logical conclusion of that. And so, you know, I appreciate that the case is before the court, and so we are necessarily limited in terms of the depths of discussion that we can have, but certainly in general terms, you cannot act as if there is a state of emergency. There is either a state of emergency or there isn't. And so I think these are very, very clear issues that really do not require too much of brain matter to be used in terms of analyzing them and bringing them to their logical conclusions.
No, of course, a state of emergency would mean the curtailment of civil liberties. Often governments are given some latitude in which to act, but governments have to justify a state of emergency. It is not because you have that power that you use it willy-nilly. You have to justify that state of emergency. And it's clear we have not seen countries around the world move into a state of emergency. So it seems to me that The global consensus is that we have not reached that point yet. The question is, are our leaders here behaving as though there is a state of emergency? It seems to me that that's how they're behaving. What's your take?
I'll tell you, my take is that it is obvious to me, it is apparent to me that the PPC regime has lost control of this pandemic. They are completely out of control. And I think rather than an admission that it is beyond us and we need all hands on deck, rather than taking an approach that says, look, let's consult with the opposition. Let us bring our best minds to bear on this, irrespective of whichever side of the political divide they find themselves. Let us understand that this is something that is affecting Guyana. COVID-19 is not a political problem, but it requires solutions that will involve actors in the political arena. And so we have to, at all times, I think, Doc, move away from politicizing this issue. You make a very important point, but what I am afraid is that there no longer exists in Guyana a space where it is about Guyana and what is in her best interests. Everything is political. And that ought not to be the case. And when we take that posture, it is damaging. It is damaging the welfare of Guyanese. It is damaging the developmental prospects of the country. And so you are right. We are at a moment. We are at a moment. And I think the government, the PPPC regime, is adopting the absolutely wrong approach to this. They are going to precipitate a situation where there is pushback. Because the PPPC must understand that there has to be room for educating, for encouraging, for winning people over to your side, for combating vaccination hesitancy and so on. We see no plan. What we see is them bullying their way and creating further division in our society by creating this class of unvaccinated vis-a-vis vaccinated. And the bigger problem that they're having, Dr. Hines, is that we are living in a society where there is information. There is information, there's disinformation, there's misinformation. And so the government has a role to play in terms of educating, but what it cannot do is to pretend as if Guyanese are not seized of a particular level of intelligence and can read and understand. You're now creating distinctions between vaccinated and unvaccinated, and the science is rapidly evolving. So one of the fallacies when we are on the ground, one of the fallacies that we have to deal with is, okay, you are vaccinated and that prevents the spread of the virus. The science is saying that that is not the case. So what do you wish for us to do? Lie to our people? The CDC has said, and I'm looking for their wording here because I want to get it right. The CDC has said that the vaccines do not prevent the spread of disease, of the COVID-19 virus. What it does is that it lessens your chances of becoming seriously ill or dying. And this is why I have a difficulty with the opinion given by Senior Counsel Rafram Karan. I have tremendous respect for him, but you cannot seek to justify these draconian measures that the government has put in place using a constitutional provision that says, yes, certain things can be done to prevent the spread of the virus. The science is saying that it doesn't prevent the spread. So what do you expect for us to do with that information is what I keep asking people, because they're expecting to create the fire, as you said, and we must out it. I am not prepared as a matter of conscience to do that. Do I support vaccination? Yes, I do. But I equally support a person's right to decide that they do not wish to be vaccinated.
Darren, let me bring you in here. Amanza reference our friend Rafram Karan, senior counsel, who on the weekend in his column in the Stabrook News points us to Article 139(1) of the Constitution that provides, and I quote, no person shall be deprived of his or her personal liberty, save as may be authorized by law in any of the following cases. And he goes down to G, which says, for the purpose of preventing the spread of an infectious or contagious disease. So the Constitution, Darren, says that the government can curtail our rights if there is a contagious and infectious disease. How do you combat that? What's your response to that?
Let me add 145.
Here you go. I love the
protection
law.
Yes, on Article 145.
Yes.
And it deals with that is the freedom of conscience provision. And what it says, the government it says nothing in or is done under the authority of any law shall be held to be inconsistent with or in contravention of this article to the extent that the law in question makes provision which is reasonably required in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, public morality, public health. So what is generally required is what is reasonable in the circumstances. That is the key word. So whereas as you would have mentioned before to Ms. Walton, and that it must be reasonably required. It cannot be done willy-nilly. They must examine the scientific fact and so forth before they make a determination. And that to be clear-cut. So go on, sorry.
No, you were.
No. So what I'm stressing is that while the Constitution may give them a latitude, the power, but it must be done. It must be reasonable. What is reasonably required in the circumstances?
So 145 tempers 129. That's what you're saying. It puts limitations on 129.
You see, 139 deals with one's freedom, limiting your freedom for public safety.
139, sorry.
That means wrong and so on. I believe 145 deals with. One may want to say, okay, we're not going to take the vaccine because it's against my religious view and so on. So the government could what it appears to do is so the government can, if there's a crisis, let us say it's a crisis situation. The question is, are we in a crisis situation in Guyana?
Yes.
Whereby everybody needs to take the vaccine. Are we at that point? As if the entire country is going to die out if this doesn't happen. What does science say? And so forth. It appears as though that you cannot use your conscience and so forth to say, oh, on my religious views and say, okay, I don't want the vaccine.
So the Constitution makes provision for freedom of conscience, and that once it's there in the Constitution, whenever there is a tension between sections of the Constitution, one has to work it through and look at the concrete situation and to make the determination. In the law, Darren and Amanda, we know that sometimes there are, those of us who are lay people, we say contradictions in the Constitution. You lawyers call it something else. But it seems to me what those two sections of the Constitution point us to is whether, in fact, as Darren is saying, we are at a place where 139 becomes absolutely necessary.
So, Dr. Hines, I am a legislative drafter, and you read the law with a very with an approach that says what it appears to mean is what it means, unless there's something that indicates otherwise. And so when Article 139 of the Constitution says at subpara G, 139(1), subarticle G, for the purpose of preventing the spread of an infectious or contagious disease, you have to ask yourself, will this measure prevent the spread of a contagious or infectious disease? And the point that I'm making is that the science is showing that it will not. That complemented by the point that Darren so very clearly makes about the issue of your conscience is exactly why I have been advocating that you have to have an exemption regime. There are people whose religious beliefs indicate or stipulate that they can't take the vaccine. And in the US, in fact, they have created exemption regimes. So people who medically cannot take the vaccine are exempted. And of course, there are conditions that one must satisfy. And so I think, again, it is all about the approach that the regime has taken. It is wrong, it is wrong, it is wrong. I simply cannot stress that enough. The other issue that we have to, I think, address our minds to is we have to ask ourselves, you are saying get vaccinated or produce a PCR test. A caring government, Dr. Hines, would make sure that every government facility is able to offer Guyanese free PCR tests. Because the reality is there are people who believe in the science and will take the vaccine. But for those who cannot, you cannot engage in constructive coercion by stipulating that I must produce a PCR test from a private facility. That is constructive coercion. You are constructively forcing me to take a vaccine because you know that I cannot afford to spend $100 every week on a PCR test. And so this will require us to sit down and take a compassionate, pro-humane approach to this matter. Why not provide free PCR tests? In the US, a PCR test is free. You go to the hospital, you get a test.
Yeah. My university.
We are 700 and something thousand people in this nation. My goodness. Are you saying to me that we cannot provide at a minimum free PCR tests? I have a fundamental difficulty with the approach of this government. It is uncaring, it is inhumane, and they're demonstrating day by day that they do not have the welfare of Guyanese at heart.
They do not have the welfare of Guyanese at heart. Darren, let me bring you in. Look, our people are out there on the streets. They are our people. They are, for the most part, our supporters. And it's not about whether we think their views are right or wrong. They're out there in the firing line. We know that governments, by their very nature, don't tolerate public protest for too long, right? And we have to anticipate, given the track record of this government, that they are likely to move against our people. Let me let you talk to our people about their legal rights vis-a-vis COVID-19 and about their right to protest.
Well, certainly the right to assembly, and I have my constitution before me here. Bear with me, please. The right to assembly is enshrined in our constitution. Just bear with me for a second. Let me pull up that provision. We want the right for us to assemble. Right. It says, except with his or her own consent, no person shall be hindered in the enjoyment of his or her right of freedom of assembly, association, and freedom to demonstrate peacefully. That is to say, his or her right to assemble freely, to demonstrate peacefully, to associate with other in a particular form, or belong in a political party, trade union, or other association for the protection of his interests. Of course, this provision certainly have its limitation. And one of those limitations, one may say, public health. Let me say that if you are peacefully assembling, you will expect to adhere, because this is a place of teaching as well, to adhere to the COVID. You stand 6 feet apart. You conduct yourself in an orderly and a disciplined manner. So once you are doing those things, I cannot see how you are or how you will be contravening any laws. So for the government to come and try to quell your protest or your assembly, I believe that they must show that you have been acting in some manner that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution. That you of course, based upon the COVID guideline, as I would have mentioned, that stipulate how you must wear your mask and so forth. So these are things they may be looking, but once you are adhering to these things, I believe they will have no right to stop you.
That's Darren Wade, the people's lawyer, a young man who was given his time and his energies to the struggle. And we all are indebted to you, Darren, for the kind of work that you are doing. It's a brand of lawyering, as we would say in the old days, that came out of the struggle starting in the 1930s, coming forward, and in the civil rights movement, where there was always a battery of lawyers there around the leaders. Thank you so much, Darren, for coming on and helping us to make sense about the legal aspects and the legal implications of what we're facing. So thank you, and I'll be calling on you again shortly. Tell you what, we're going to take a short break, listen to some more of the vision by Lady Adan, and then we'll be joined by Aubrey Norton, Executive Secretary in the Office of the Leader of the Opposition himself, a political analyst and political activist. Take a short break and we'll be back.
Oh, tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Oh, tell it on the mountain, that the old man stay strong. And if you hear revelation, this is revelation. On them are the road, I'm on. On them are the road to come. Adonai! I took a journey spiritually. My eyes beheld a vision shone clearly in front of me. Now in the vision I saw an old man slowly play the drum, humming a melody that was strange to me, and he called me, he said, Dana, come. He arose and he showed me a country, beautiful everywhere, a land of endless bounty and riches beyond compare. But there was enough for everybody, material needs. But alas, when the old man showed me, my people, they were all overpowered with greed. Oh, and the old man did it. Oh, yes, the old man did it. Oh, yes, take this melody, girl, go to your country and warn them on the road. And if you hear him, boom, bam, bang, congratulations, man.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
And welcome back to Politics 101, the strong female Calypsonian voices. We all know of Calypso Rose, the mother of them all, and singing Sandra. And that's Lady Adana doing her version of singing Sandra's vision. The merging of the Calypso sound with the spiritual Shango, we call it the spiritual sound in Guyana, brought with us across the Middle Passage. And despite the hammering on our consciousness, we survived. And we survive with the culture. We survive with the boom, 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 boom. It's a testimony to our ability not just to survive, but to overcome. And we are at a critical moment, another critical moment. And we've got to fight this through. And we're going to fight it through. We're going to fight with the drum. We're going to fight with the voice. We're going to fight with our bodies. And we're going to fight with our conscience. And we're going to fight with leadership that would give the kind of creative guidance that is needed at this time. So much to me, let me bring in my new guest, Aubrey Norton, and bring back Amanza Desir. You all don't beat me up. I know you all want to hear Aubrey and Amanza, but give me a little thing, no man. They call me Aubrey. You are in New York a couple of weekends ago.
I'm in.
You are still.
Yes.
That's why the people going on so bad.
Coming up at the weekend.
So you're in New York, and apparently you've been making the rounds, and apparently you've been telling some truth, and apparently the truths have been touching some people in some places they don't want to be touched. And I understand they've written to the US Congress complaining that you, Amanza, they call one more name, the Indian Guyanese sister thing from Region 6. You all yes, they call the three your name. But of course, Rickford Burke, them always getting called. That you all went and lied to the Yankee people. You all tell them all kind of lies. That Guyana is a place that is oozing prosperity and everybody's smiling and happy. And you all are liars. So they wrote to the Americans to say that you're all alive. First of all, is there some hypocrisy there, Aubrey?
Well, it's more than hypocrisy. Look, the People's Progressive Party believes that it can practice racism and preach a narrative that is different, and all and sundry must comply. Unfortunately, what has happened is that concrete cases of their racism have been given. And since they do not have the ability to challenge them because they are factual, what they are seeking to do is to resort to their PR machinery with the hope of behaving like Trump. You know what the reality is, but you create a narrative contrary to the reality with the hope that people will buy it. Now, the evidence is out there. The people in Guyana are aware what is happening. We have merely brought it to the attention of the international community. I spent some extra time here. I met with Caribbean ambassadors at the OAS. I met with some government officials in New Jersey and around, and I have been putting the facts out. The PPP has an opportunity to challenge the facts. I have asked them, let them put out the list of names of people they give land on the highway, the Suzdijk Linden Highway. And when they give the names, 1/3 of the land they give out is non-Indo-Guyanese, I will apologize instantly. But they can't take up the challenge because they know what they have done. So I am not worried about them. The facts are there, and we will continue to give the international community and the Guyanese people the facts.
What the reception to your lobbying, and I use that word loosely, what's the response to your lobbying to elements who might have been taken in by the narrative last year?
The comments are like, one, why during the election impasse we didn't provide this information and lobby directly people in the United States. But outside of that, there is general acceptance. There is a general view that a lot of these things were concealed. For instance, when you explain the electoral system in Guyana, they are in awe because they assume it's a first past the post like they have. And so they don't understand the nuances in the electoral system. And I was at pains at times to point it out so that they understand how we arrive at a government. A lot of them are clearly going to support us going forward. They accept that what we are saying to the world is factual. I think they have noted that the government does not answer the questions raised. They just make a broad swipe saying there is no discrimination. So I think we have been able to mobilize support and to turn the attention on the installed PPP regime and its authoritarian behavior.
Amanza, let me bring you in here, and I want to read from Stabrook News editorial, Amanza, and get your response on the other side. And Stabrook News says there in part, in fact, an absence of evidence was the hallmark of the occasion, meaning the march and rally, as in the case of those 2,000 public servants who purportedly had been dismissed on the grounds of race. Their posts were also not identified, and APNU was not about to enlighten the unduly curious. As for the millions allocated in the National Assembly not making it to the people, as anyone with even a modicum of understanding about the budget, how the budget works knows, what was presented was a meaningless generalization. So Stabrook News is accusing you all of making charges, general charges, without evidence. Respond.
I will say that the Stabrook News, and particularly in the context of the march and rally that you had, you are necessarily constrained in what you can present. So for me, that assertion is asinine to begin with. We have been providing the facts, and let me hasten to say that even the response that was sent, the 28-page response that was sent, is riddled with just flat out lies. You go through it and you can just randomly pick one of them. And I want to highlight one that they said. Furthermore, the AP and UFC coalition, and they went on to say a couple of things, terminated 99% of permanent secretaries. And that is so patently false, because Dr. Hines, the reality is that the majority of the permanent secretaries were retained. And the facts are there. And this is the difficulty that the PPP is having. They forget that you live in an information age and that you can go and do your research and disprove very easily what they're saying. So you had, for example, P.S. Emil Magaril, who served under the PPP. He served under the coalition government as well. You had Jocelyn McKenzie, who was the PS of Natural Resources. He still is up to today. At the Ministry of Public Works, then Public Infrastructure, you had PS Balraj Balram, who served from 2015 to 2017 when his contract expired and he did not renew it. You had Ms. Delon Ned, who was at the Ministry of Education, but then she was transferred to agriculture. You have Mr. Alfred King. You have Ms. Abina Moore, who was in fact promoted to the Ministry of the Presidency. And so you see, just some research, but the PPP asserts that 99% of the PSs were terminated. Just that, you can simply see and disprove that even what they are proposing to say in rebuttal to us is just manifestly and patently false. And so we have the facts, and we are willing and able to present those facts whenever we deem it necessary to so do. And so,
I think you put your finger on something there that I haven't seen the report in its entirety, but I've seen excerpts from it. That instead of answering the charges that are leveled against them, they go back to what the coalition did do.
Precisely, and it is the point that Aubrey just made. Govern the country. You have said that you have been elected, then govern. This tit for tat, and then you present information that is not correct. Is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. You have not. You said that you haven't terminated people. Then provide a list of staff turnover and all of these things. This is how you do it. You, as the government, you are the custodian of that information. But instead of answering the charges, they cannot answer them because it is true. And so just one random pullout of the missive that was sent, and you see that the facts on the ground disprove that. And so, I don't expect anything better from the PPPC. They, however, are failing to realize that this is a time where people can go research and get the information for themselves.
Get the information for themselves. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Aubrey and Amanza some more about the outreaches that have been going on to the international community and how important those outreaches are, given the precedence that was set last year with the involvement, as they would say, in the entanglement of those external forces in our domestic affairs. We'll take a short break, and then we come back. I'm David Hines, political activist and commentator. If you're looking for informed discussion on Guyanese politics, you must join me every Tuesday and Thursday evening at 6:30 on Politics 101 with Dr. David Hines. On that program, I interview policymakers, politicians, political activists on Guyanese politics in the past and the present. So make sure you tune in to Politics 101 on CAMS TV at 6:30 every Tuesday and Thursday. And on Mondays at 7 o'clock in the evening, 7 p.m., you can join me for Hindsight. On that program, I give my take on politics. And then you can call in and talk to me about the politics in Guyana, the Caribbean, and the rest of the world. That's Monday evenings at 7 o'clock. And so here we go. Monday, 7 o'clock, you can join me. On Tuesday at 6:30, Politics 101. On Thursdays at 6:30, Politics 101. And if you haven't gotten enough of me by then, you can catch me on Tuesday mornings on the Buxtonian Morning Time with Kedati Amsterdam, where we rap about politics also. And that's at 7 o'clock in the morning on CAMS TV. All of these programs are on CAMS TV. So catch me Monday, on Tuesday, on Thursday, and you get all you want to know about Guyanese politics.
So we're not in the realm of supposition anymore. We know for a fact that people have voted. We know for a fact that people who are not in the jurisdiction would have voted. We know for a fact that there are 47 ballot boxes without documents. These are facts that are incontrovertible. It's not up for debate. We're not unsure about these things. And so I think the only reason that we ended up at a petition was that the court recognized that while everybody in fact recognized that whilst we have discovered these anomalies and irregularities, the mechanism through which you could address them is an elections petition. So it does not negate the fact of the findings. It does not negate the fact that the PPP has not been able to refute these allegations. And so even with this throwing out of the petition, temporarily I would say, because I believe we have very, very strong prospects in terms of appeal, the PPP has not convinced anybody that they have not gotten there by illegitimate means. Because the very mechanism through which we were going to receive, as it were, the imprimatur of the court to say that these actions were illegal, it is the same mechanism through which the PPP could have acquitted themselves of these charges. And so these facts remain, and this is what I want to encourage our people. Don't be disheartened by this. The facts are the facts.
Facts are the facts. Okay. There is a growing, I think, a somewhat isolated view that we should give up on what happened last year and move on. Have you been hearing that, and what's your response to it?
Who the question is addressed to?
You, Aubrey. Start with you.
I will answer the question, but I want to deal first with Stabrook News.
Yes, go ahead.
Now, evidence was given. I wrote and invited Irfan Ali to respond to the fact that they said when they were in opposition that all people who got land under the APNU will either have to give it back or face the courts. I know of people in Essequibo of Indo-Guyanese descent who got lands, and even on the Suez-Linden Highway. Now, when the PPP came to power, they did not go after any other ethnic group except the African Guyanese. That is a public fact. The three people they threatened to carry before the court and took before the court were all Afro-Guyanese. And they were not the only ethnic group that got land. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say, every child in Guyana knows that the PPP distributed COVID relief. They put their activists in charge of it. When they were dealing with PPP strongholds, they give it to households with an ID card. And when they came to the African Guyanese community and Indo and Amerindian Guyanese, who they perceive to have served the PPP, they tell them that they have to provide evidence that they own the property. Now, where on earth every household is owned their property? The concept of household is a family living as one in a household. And so there was marked discrimination, and the pink slip, which they became famous for, was given to African Guyanese without money. Then let's come to the flood relief that they had recently. Apart from the fact that they took African Guyanese name off of the list, and if Stabrook News one, they can go and check the list that was submitted and the list that finally came back. They took off a lot of Afro-Guyanese and they put on Indo-Guyanese who did not have a farm. And worse than that, they calculated in dealing with the flood that they will give flood relief. But when it came to the agricultural sector, they started to talk about flood relief based on acreage, not on household and a farm, on acreage. What that meant is that essentially they were skillfully ensuring they empower big Indo-Guyanese farmers, because the small farmer will get only a pittance. It is the big farmers, once you paying by acreage, that will get a lot of the money. And a lot of them happen to be PPP people. And there was clear discrimination in the flood relief in terms of the entire approach, where some is household and farmstead. But when it came to certain elements of agriculture production, it was based on acreage. It meant the more acreage you have, the more money you will get. And they're talking about evidence. G.H.K. Lal, who is an Indo-Guyanese, who worked was chairman of the geology and mines, pointed out the clear discrimination against two workers there, and that can be replicated across the country. Stabrook News and its editor must know that the contracts that are allocated in Guyana today, 90% or more go to one ethnic group. That's a fact. If the editor of Stabrook News walk around and just see who get the contract, well, he doesn't have to go to the data. Just see who get the contracts, and it will be patently evident that it is one ethnic group that they give these contracts to. Now, they restrict Afro-Guyanese to a house lot. But if you now go and ask to the people who are getting large acreage of lands on the highway all across the country, it is one ethnic group. That is a fact. I have nothing against Indo-Guyanese. I believe a lot of poor Indo-Guyanese are treated badly by this government, but that their focus is on the elite and the people who could give them the perquisites of office. And so in land distribution, there is clear discrimination. The quantity of lands that are given to one ethnic group, other ethnic groups are deprived of those amounts of lands. So, in my opinion, there should be no talk of no evidence. Can Stabrook News not go to Ithaca and know that the people of Ithaca and all the African Guyanese backlands that could not be farmed, they were made farmable, if there's a word like that, under the AP and UAFC. And one of the first tasks the PPP perform is to go to Ithaca and take away the equipment for them to do drainage and irrigation. So I am giving them concrete information. Could Stabrook News tell me if it is not true that they treat the regions won by the PPP differently to the regions that are won by the APNU AFC. There is abundance of evidence. What Stabrook News needs to do is to say, look, I am a front for the PPP, and therefore I will say these things, but don't challenge people's intellect with such stupidity. Stabrook News comes alive when it is time to be anti-APNU AFC. They are glaringly and openly supportive of the PPP and want people to accept the newspaper as a credible paper. It is not. It is a front for the People's Progressive Party. It reinforces the racism in the PPP, and then they try to create a facade of them being independent and objective. That wouldn't fool me, and I know for sure it doesn't fool the people of Guyana. Now, your other question, the question you asked me, sorry, I need to address it, but I didn't feel that we should have left not giving the evidence of PPP discrimination, which is so glaring, even Stevie Wonder can see it.
What happened last year and move on.
Yeah. Yeah, what is the question?
They're saying, even some people who are partial to us are saying that we need to give up what happened last year and move on. We need to get off this thing about the PPP being installed. How do you respond to that?
First of all, I would say the people saw what came out of the ballot boxes, and the people know that they were involved in fraud. Now, a logical sequel of that is that they are illegitimate. The US State Department confirmed that they are installed. We must move on in terms of preparing to beat them, get a new voters list, and beat them at the next election. But we cannot move on from analyzing the facts, highlighting the facts, and ensuring we learn from that experience so that it should not and will not reoccur. But to say move on, meaning forget it, I believe is not a good thing to do. People are inspired when they recognize that they were done a wrong and they want to rectify a wrong. And that will give them the energy and vigor so that we can organize and beat the People's Progressive Party. I think we have moved on. In terms of knowing the government is installed, knowing the government is legitimate, knowing that it's an incompetent, corrupt, and divisive government, and therefore the government itself is creating the conditions for its own destruction. We therefore would have moved on to preparing to get rid of them. And that, I think, is critical. Now, our people want to take on the PPP politically. And that is not because we told them to take them on politically. It is because our people feel an injustice was done to them. In the diaspora, everybody I encounter is dissatisfied with how the APNU AFC was moved out of government. And so we have to use it as the fuel for the fire that will propel us forward and ensure we get rid of this illegitimate installed government.
There, addressing the very important point of the narrative of suffering and the importance of that narrative in fueling people's resistance and their desire to correct the wrongs that were done to them. Amanzi Bazir, same question to you.
No, I do not think we can. To my mind, it is not a proposition that has any utility whatsoever. As Aubrey correctly said, this is not something that you just let go of. This is about setting history and having history correctly record what has happened. There cannot be reconciliation without truth. And so I do not propose that we go down this Kumbaya road without understanding that unless we get to the heart of the matters, that we are simply keeping things at the surface level, and we will, continue to degenerate. I think Aubrey has said it so accurately. We know what has happened. The people know what has happened. It is something that continues to be in the back of our minds. And that is something that we have to set straight, set right. So, no, it is not something that I am prepared to do. And I do not get the sense that any one of my colleagues are prepared to do that. We will continue to reiterate what happened over that 5-month period. And so we cannot and must not be afraid to uh, reiterate that. The point that Aubrey makes as well is that we have to do that whilst being in preparation mode. And I fully agree. I fully agree. I think what makes it so egregious is that having been installed and coming to government by illegitimate means, the PPPC regime now refuses to govern Guyana for all Guyanese. I think that is like rubbing salt in the wound. And so we are not prepared to let it go. But we also must acknowledge that we have to prepare to move forward and to unseat them. And I think in order to do that, we will have to do some groundbreaking things, take some action that we might not ordinarily take, but we will have to do what we must to ensure that this installed cabal that was foisted on Guyana is unseated, and make the preparation to do it. So no, it's not a proposition that I find useful at all.
David,
Yes, go ahead, Aubrey.
yeah, I wanted to go back to COVID. There's some
Yes.
points I think need to be made. One has to understand what the PPP is doing with COVID. One has to understand how they started. When COVID started, the PPP was in the forefront of saying it was a scam and that it was being used for all kind of nefarious means. So they started from the inception with political posturing, knowing full well that COVID was real, but purporting and telling their supporters that it wasn't real. Now, when they got power, they still believe it wasn't real. And so at the time when they should have taken added measures, they were responding to the business community interest and not the general business community, specific PPP business communities' interest of reopening Guyana. In the process, they have endangered Guyana, but they don't mind if the casino make money at the expense of us. They don't mind the police selectively closing who they want to close. They go through the south of Georgetown and they close everybody. When it comes to the north of Georgetown and you go places like Sleeping, they're having a ball and the government isn't concerned. And then they chose an incompetent health minister who shows no ability to manage even his language. And then we are where we are. But what is important to note? It is important to note that for the PPP, COVID is a tool of repression. COVID is something that should be used to repress its opponents. Let me give you the evidence. They talk about social distancing. Go and look at all the pictures of the ministers in outreach. In PPP communities, in AP and UFC communities, they pay no regard to the protocols vis-a-vis social distancing. But then, if the AP and UFC wants to do something, they want you to abide by the protocol. So there's a selective use of protocol while they themselves dismantle the rule. And then they use it as a mechanism to politically control the police. So the police can go in some areas, but in some other areas, they can't go. And then when it comes to opening of the schools, most of the Caribbean leaders are saying, no, let us stay with virtual learning until the mechanisms are put in place. And we have an apology for an education minister who keeps going ahead. She keeps going ahead all the time like if you is a preposition, not recognizing she's wrong. No, I would have expected if there was not an interest in using COVID as a tool of repression, then they would have engaged the opposition, engaged some wider stakeholders, and come up with a comprehensive approach to COVID. But if you see, the only elements of COVID they are interested in is the repressive ones, mandatory vaccination. And then Irfan Ali uttering what I consider to be the summit of stupidity by his attempt to suggest that is not mandatory. I won't go into that because Amanza dealt with that properly. But the thing is, Caribbean leaders have a different position, and they always say they're going after best practices. But when they see best practices that contradict what they are doing, they resort to their repression. So what I'm saying to you is we should not be carried away that the PPP has any interest in dealing with COVID. First, they are incompetent, and it is manifest in their approach. Secondly, they are corrupt. When you see the resources that are going to PPP acolytes, you will recognize clearly that COVID relief for them is a means of corruptly putting money in their supporters' hands. And then when you see the handling of it, you know that it is divisive. You know the focus is not serving the Guyanese people, is using COVID as a tool of repression. They show no interest in educating people on COVID. They show no interest in educating people on the importance of diet. And so I would say to the Guyanese people and people in the diaspora, don't be fooled. The PPP has no interest in anything but using COVID as a tool of repression.
Using COVID as a tool of repression. Amanza Desir, you got the last word because I think it's program time. You're muted.
I don't think I could put it more succinctly than Aubrey did. It is a fact. It is an absolute fact that they are bent on using COVID as a tool for repression of their political opponents. What I had hoped to see was some kind of vision and leadership from the Ministry of Education. What I had hoped to see was proper planning and investing some of that same money that they are just funneling to their cronies in invested in the education sector to facilitate virtual learning, to make sure that each child is equipped with the ability to connect virtually to online classes. This pandemic presented an opportunity for the PPP to demonstrate that they cared. And they have failed because the reality is that they do not care. My final observation is that they continue to make those of us who speak about the issue of race racist. We want to say to them that it will not work. You will not cause us to question our love for all Guyanese because we choose to highlight your racism. Those tactics do not work anymore. And so, to the extent that any group is ethnically insecure, we will represent them because Guyana belongs to all Guyanese and we have a duty to represent them. As it happens, the PPP continues to govern in a manner where the poor and the working class continue to be marginalized, whilst they and their cronies live high off the hog. And we will continue to highlight that. And we have no apologies for doing that. And those people who would support them in their tyranny, they must understand that the day will come when you will realize that to the extent that any Guyanese is insecure in their country, all of us are insecure. We are interconnected. We are far more interdependent than the PPPC would have you believe. I draw that to say this. We will continue to speak out for the poor and the working class. We will continue to represent them. We will continue to call out the PPPC for their racist approach to governance. We will continue to call them out for their corruption. And so we will continue to represent the people to the best of their ability. I also want to say to our people, our fellow Guyanese, that as Darren pointed out at the beginning, you have constitutional rights. And you have a right to speak up when your constitutional right is being infringed. And no one can deprive you of that right. And so as we have a duty to represent you, we also wish to encourage you that you have a duty to speak up as well. And collectively, we can unseat this racist cabal and build a Guyana where every Guyanese has access to the patrimony of the nation. That song that you began, that calypso that you began with, is so poignant. Guyana is a land where there is enough for everyone, and we must ensure that we leave that Guyana for our children. Thank you for having me, Dr. Hines.
Thank you for coming on again. Aubrey, anything that you want to leave us with?
I would say this in parting, that essentially the PPP regime has proven they are incompetent, they are corrupt, they are racist. Our supporters are clear in their minds that we have to take on the PPP politically. And I think the task personally I will be involved in is helping to organize our support base to ensure that we can fight the injustices of the People's Progressive Party and to remove the government and ensure that we put in place a government that respects the rule of law, that not only talks democracy, but acts democratically, and ensure that all Guyanese can benefit from Guyana. That is my final message.
Thank you very much, Aubrey Norton, and be safe and get back to Guyana to physically be on the ground with our people. You've mentioned it twice here tonight, that our people want to take on this government politically, and they're doing so. They're in the streets, they're on the streets, they're taking on the PPP. They're doing so without direction from those of us who refer to ourselves as leaders. So you're right. This is a critical moment in our contemporary political history. The people are showing the way, and as leaders, we have to follow. Thank you very much, Aubrey. Thank you, Amanza, and thanks to the people's lawyer, Darren Wade, who was on earlier. People are on the move, and you know when our people are on the move, they are showing their disgust, their anger. People are generally slow to anger. They've endured a year of turmoil, a year of advantage being taken on them. They watch and they pray, and now they're acting. And when people lead, leaders must follow. Leaders must give guidance. Our task is not to out fires set by the PPP. The PPP have angered Guyanese. They've angered our people, our support base. And we have a duty to ensure that we give all the support that we can give, that our people will very soon realize the justice that they deserve and that is their birthright. Exxon announced that it spent $19 billion in Guyana in the first 6 months of this year. They said that they've engaged over 700 vendors. I'm asking where those monies were spent, who were the vendors. Because we've got to make sure that, as some of you have been saying, the money is coming in, where it's going. Next week, I'm going to pull the economic team together, and we are going to engage that subject and other subjects. We're going to talk next week also about cash grants, cash transfers, the rare cash grants, the rare cash transfers. What impact cash grants and cash transfers can have on lifting the poor and the powerless to a position of empowerment and development. The weekend is coming, but there is no rest for us. We've got to work on the weekend because the struggle doesn't have weekend and during the week. The struggle is permanent. The struggle is consistent. And the struggle goes on. The old cry from the 70s when I came into this thing is people's power, no dictator. People's power, no dictator. It was relevant then, and it's even more relevant tonight. Tata, walk good, stay safe, and stay in their face. Undermine them whenever, wherever, and however you can. Undermine them. Good night, and see you all next week.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.